All right. We're recording now, so welcome back, everybody, for session 2 of the DigiMusic Summer 2020 video game composition challenge. This second session, we're going to be focusing on rhythm and tempo. We might be talking a little bit about things that we mentioned in our last presentation, which is now uploaded on the DigiMusic website. But for the most part, we'll be exploring new ideas. So the session today, we've asked that you are using Google Chrome, and that's so that you can share some things that we work on in some activities today. So we're going to be using some browser-based they're called sequencers to build some grooves and some melodies and that sort of thing. So if you aren't operating on Chrome, not a huge deal. When we get to the activity, I would recommend that you maybe sign out and sign back in with Chrome so that we can hear what you've got. The other thing too is if you've got some music that you'd like to share, it's very difficult to share audio over Google Meet. So if you have some audio that you'd like to share with us that you're working on for your composition for the challenge, I think the best way is to email it to me. I'm going to put my email in here because I've got my whole system set up so that I can share audio off of my computer. So between now and the end of class, if you have something that you'd like to share that you'd like everybody to listen to, if you could email it to me at this email that I'm typing in the chat bar. If nobody's quite there yet, that's okay. We've got a chock full class today anyway, so we will, but we'll definitely make time if you do have something that we can listen to. All right, so rhythm and tempo. As far as music goes, these are my favorite two parts of music. I think they're some of the most important. If you look historically speaking, rhythm was likely how music started, banging sticks together, possibly singing, but there were certainly, we would assume, rhythmic aspects to any kind of music that was made as far as prehistory goes. We're going to jump way far ahead. You can see my quote today comes from the Beastie Boys. Nothing sounds quite like the 808. We'll talk about what an 808 is in a little bit. But first, just a quick overview of rhythms. How many of you have ever seen this drawn on the band room or choir room board?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah,
we've all seen it. Yeah, this one too many times. Yes, this is sort of how I was taught rhythm. I know I've written it on the board. This is a very common way of looking at rhythms. And then we're given this, and then we're expected to read something like this.
Oh yeah, easy.
Easy peasy. Yeah, this is Brian Ferneyhue. By the way, this is an actual piece of music. This isn't one of those joke ones. Second string quartet by Brian Ferneyhue. It's of the new complexity genre. I don't know if we call it a genre, but in the classical world, one of the more recent developments. I really enjoy playing music like this because it's ridiculously challenging. But do I really think of rhythms in this way?
I'm just gonna look it up right now.
I love
to hear how it sounds.
Yeah, I wonder how this sounds.
Not very good. Not very good. It's more, to me, it's more for the challenge. But this is, we look at this and then we jump to something like this. Obviously, there's a couple steps in between, but rhythms are very, very abstract way of looking at things. So the other way of looking at rhythm, which is what we're going to be discussing more today, is through the viewpoint of an arranger. So this is a Roland TR-808. How many of you have heard of 808s before in song lyrics?
Not in song lyrics.
Yeah.
I think there's one in GarageBand though. On the.
Yeah, you've seen the 808. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the beats, like one of the
the drum kits
I can use. Yeah, one of the drum kits.
Totally.
Don't even sound like the original 808 anymore.
No, they don't. So this is what an original 808 actually looked like. It's an analog synthesizer. So what's happening is in our last session, we looked at an actual analog synthesizer. This machine really focuses and shapes those sound waves to sound kind of like a drum beat. Now, I actually have just one of those cheap versions of the 808s that you have in your Logic and that sort of thing. Hopefully you guys can hear that. Yeah, I know. I'll show you guys how I'm making that sound in a little bit. But yeah, it really it was a terrible instrument, and nobody wanted it, and so the thrift shops ended up having just hundreds of them until hip hop.
Hey, this sounds great.
Yeah, hip hop producers got their hands on them because they were super cheap. Everybody just threw them out. The 909 was the the next step in that series, and it actually used samples. So people were starting to use 909 a little more. But the 808, the hip hop producers found that like if you really cranked that bass, you get that thump sound that really there's no other way to get it. And that when you hear a car going by, one of those little Honda Civics that's slammed to the floor and the whole back seat is turned into a subwoofer and you hear that boom.
That's very specific.
That is an 808. Very likely that it's either an 808 or a recreation of an 808 being played in that rap song that these guys are playing in their car very loud. You know the cars I'm talking about. So yeah, and so you're wondering like, what does this have to do with anything to do with composition and rhythms? So the idea of this rhythm composer is that it's actually a sequencer. And what a sequencer does is it basically breaks the beat up into little segments. So you see there's 16 buttons at the bottom of this 808. To sequence a beat into it, you would press one of the buttons and pick which, first you would dial in which part of the drum you wanted. So the kick drum you would put on beat 1, maybe beat 5, maybe on 9 and 1, so that you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 808 just kind of loops it over and over and over and over again. And then you could put a clap on the third beat.
So you create a sound with the dials and then assign it to one of the
the subdivision of the bar. So those 16, we think of those as the 16th note. So if we go back, that would be your bottom 16th notes if you want the theory. But yeah, each one of those buttons represents a subdivision of your bar. I mean, you could make a 2-bar beat. You could do a lot of things. I don't want to go into the details of how the 808 specifically works. You're just assigning sounds to particular places in time. And this wasn't the first sequencer, but again, this was probably the most famous of the sequencers. It's the one most of us have heard. If you listen to hip hop at all, just about everybody references the 808. That's where my quote was from, Beastie Boys. It was a very, very important machine. Today, sequencers look a little bit different. This is what a sequencer in your DAW looks like. It's called a piano roll. And essentially, it's the same thing. Each one of these keys is assigned to a sound. So it could be drums. This, I believe, is piano. I wouldn't want a drum beat that's that complicated. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. But each one of these dots represents a sound on the key, and then it takes place at a certain place in time as the scroll rolls along. So this is what sequencing has developed to. Now, this was actually stolen from the original sequencer. So I shouldn't say the 808 was the original sequencer.
The real piano roll.
The real piano roll. So check it out. This sheet in the top middle, that's an original piano roll. There's holes punched through it. So those holes would initiate the piano playing that particular note, and the piano just automatically played itself. This was from 1910. There were player pianos as early as, I believe, I want to say 90s, but that might even be earlier than that. When you talk about piano rolls, you can't help but mention Conlon Nancarrow, who actually composed just for player pianos. He didn't compose with notes. He composed with dots on the page in a sequencer. So this is just a little bit of a clip of what one of his pieces sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm not getting any sound here. Are you guys getting sound?
Real toddler turning their hand into the
We're all getting sound.
Sorry, there it is.
Lovely.
Yeah. So
that's chaotic.
Sounds like one of those. It sounds like
I agree.
those people. That sounds like when you convert MP3s to piano. Like you convert the entire MP3
Yeah.
piano. They sound like that.
Alright, those sound
Yeah,
really
it
cool.
just didn't sound great at all, in my opinion.
Again, he was a contemporary composer, so
Avant-garde music, you don't
The
understand.
keyboard is contemporary.
yeah, avant-garde, contemporary.
Yeah. Black MIDI covers of songs that sound really good.
Totally.
And like those
Not this
MIDI
one.
shape things, and like
Yeah, and they make,
MIDI,
images,
MIDI
yeah.
art. Yeah, like Andrew Huang's
glad-
like, narwhal thing.
I'm glad you guys brought it up because I
Oh
actually
my
have a video of
God.
Andrew Huang
Yeah.
Yes.
playing
it's
a unicorn. So this is Andrew Huang's unicorn, which started. He drew a bunch of pictures, but this was the one that kind of started it all.
Hey, it's Andrew Huang.
I didn't want to watch too much of that, but I just wanted to show you what could be done with these sequencers. So you can have a lot of fun with sequencers. Now, there's just one other thing I wanted to show you because this will be similar to what you guys are using. You'll be using sequencers in just a second. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second and show you what sort of the modern day, like what most composers now use to sequence beats. This is what's called an Ableton push. It's a little bit more complicated than
Double camera angle.
a Launchpad. No, it's a little bit more advanced than a Launchpad. It is
Better.
it's technically a MIDI a DAW controller. So it actually doesn't run on its own. It has to be used through Ableton Live, but it's just a very clear way of showing you sequencing and how quick and easily you can sequence grooves and beats without having to rely on that standard notation. There's nothing wrong with standard notation. Like I said, I loved studying Brian Fernihue back in university when that's the kind of thing I did. Now it's so much easier. So very much like an 808, you press a button to assign what kind of drum. So we'll do the kick drum. And then I've just got this buttons highlighted so that I only use these two rows to sequence. And I want to sequence on beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if I hit play, hopefully, well, there you go. So now we have beats going. And the nice thing about a sequencer is it can play and you can add notes while it's playing. So let's add a clap here. Now we've got a bit of a beat going, maybe a hi-hat. Maybe a bit of a cymbal. There we go. And we got a bit of a groove going. And that's it. That's all I had to do. Maybe I'm not liking that there we go. That's something a little bit. So you can play around with it. And that's the nice thing about sequencers is you can add and take things out. Maybe you want some cowbell.
That's a cowbell?
Yeah, this is an 808 cowbell.
Doesn't sound like one.
Yeah, if you guys are into hip hop at all, Africa Bambaataa, you'll hear in his song Renegades. This isn't the right rhythm, but he uses a lot of cowbell. So, yeah, you can go.
Like an 80s song. Like with
sorry?
pop, it sounds like some kind of random 80s pop song, which is like
Totally.
the
Yeah. The 808 really it evokes a lot of, like, it's been used so often. That's it. That's all a sequencer is. And you just get to basically pick where you put the notes. And, you know, it's good to have music theory knowledge. It's good to understand how rhythms work. But really, at the end of the day, whatever the quickest way is for you to build music, build rhythms, I think that's the most important thing. So next, we're actually going to be doing that ourselves. So I've got two options for you. There's Groove Pizza and Chrome Labs, the Song Maker. Both of these are browser-based. Good. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to think about your clips in particular. So even if you have started writing music, for your clips. You can either maybe recreate it, or you can maybe try something new. But I want you to basically build a short rhythm, just like I did just there. A 1 or 2 bar rhythm, however much you want to put in there. I'm just going to copy paste. Oh, Caitlin's already doing that. Thank you, Caitlin. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to set a timer for, we'll say 5 minutes. We can cut that out of the recording. That's easy enough to do. And then we'll come back. And if you're in Chrome, all you have to do is share a tab, and we can actually listen to your groove. So 5 minutes starting now. Do hang on to these because we will hopefully have a quick second to revisit them by the end. I'm going to get back on this presentation train. So I think because we had a chance to sort of talk about our own grooves, I don't want to spend too much time on these, but we do remember we listened to BioShock, the TV ad for that. Actually, just a quick second, just to remind us how they sound.
Peggy 18.
So we've got this real straight ahead groove, boom, chuck, boom, boom, chuck. So nothing too, whoops, that was supposed to stop, but not do that. So very simple, definitely different, a very straight ahead groove, just a boom, check, boom, boom, chuck. For a TV commercial, that's kind of what you want. You want the music to get people pumped up, but you don't want it to be distracting. And so that the idea of just having a song, it was good, it really fit in well, but it wasn't like crazy distracting. So something to consider if you're looking at building an ad. And then we go ahead and look at the Halo. This time, because the gameplay was so loud, I just actually pulled a clip of the Halo theme. And this is during gameplay, so this is thematic. Oh, I did it again. So remember, we were talking about music for marketing, music as thematic material, and then music for waiting around. So this is the Halo, the thematic part of Halo. And you hear the rhythm in this one. Maybe. We've got an assortment of drums. The music's a lot busier in this, or the rhythms, I should say, are a lot busier in this than they were in your TV ads. And then looking at our waiting music from Destiny, Taken King. Very, very simple rhythm. Everything's unison. Long notes. So very, very different kinds of rhythms used for very different purposes. And I think you guys did a really good job of outlining that in each other's rhythms. So great. We're going to move on to something very closely related to rhythm. That's tempo. And this portion is quite a bit quicker. The main focus, I think, should be on rhythm, because tempo, once you get working in your DAWs, it's fairly simple to adjust that. But it is very, very important. And we're going to look at a couple of examples of how it's used. This quote from Ray Stevens, a folk singer. He said, "The human brain is a funny thing. It's very susceptible to tempo and melody." And I thought that was appropriate, talking about tempo changes. So in video games, we've got sometimes abrupt tempo changes can mean something. So we go back to the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and you'll hear the main theme for just like a couple seconds, and then the star theme jumps in when you get the star. And then we're back to our regular tempo. So what did that do? What did that abrupt tempo change do to the gameplay?
The tempo change, I guess, changed the mood. So that like by changing the tempo, the song. I think there's a different song playing there. So
It was a totally different song. Yeah.
So it changes the mood instead of
Yeah, it's frantic. You've got a star. You're going to crash into as many enemies as you can because you're indestructible for that very, very short amount of time. And yes, it was obviously the piece changed, but if they just changed music, do you think it would have been as effective?
no.
It
wouldn't have expressed the emotion at that point. At the end,
totally.
as well as it could have.
Yeah. No, that's great.
It like makes the player feel like rushed, and also like it just like the speed of the change of the tempo and speed just makes everything feel, as you said before, frantic and just rushes you
Absolutely.
off. Yeah,
Totally. Tempo can have a huge impact regardless of the song. I want to visit another game. Tony Hawk. This game didn't have any original compositions written for it. It was all basically punk rock music that was picked for the game, and it would just cycle as you played through the game. It would just cycle through the music, and this is the entire soundtrack on YouTube, which is cool. And I'm going to pick random spots through the entire soundtrack and have a listen to. I mean, the music's all kind of punk rock, but listen to the tempo in the songs.
Looking older all the time, feeling younger in my mind. Here I am.
There's a song. So his tempo moves pretty good too. This is probably the slowest song in the whole game. Lots of fast drums. Lots of So I could literally click on any spot in this whole soundtrack. I went ahead and listened to the whole thing before, but you get the idea. We maybe missed a couple of the songs, but that's all super high tempo, super high energy. Do any of you skateboard, by the way? Any skateboard? No skateboard. It's not as big out.
I have a
in Vancouver.
longboard.
No.
You have a longboard? Yeah. It's cool. Yeah, longboarding is more the thing out here. Yeah, when you're skateboarding, it's just the, when you were playing that game, that music just made you feel like you were skateboarding. It's just like you were cruising the whole time because every song in there was fast paced, high energy, and it just kept you going through the whole game. So the one game that really stuck out to me, again coming from my past of video games, where tempo was used really in an interesting way, is this Kirby. So we're just going to watch a couple minutes of it. So you're going to see through sort of the intro and the waiting screen, and then into the first little bit of gameplay, and with a real focus on a little bit of rhythm, but mainly tempo. And let me know what you think. Oops. So that's during gameplay. We're just going to do this backwards then. Go back to the very beginning. So that, what would you guys describe that tempo as during gameplay?
Very fast.
Very fast. Yeah, it's Kirby. You're cruising. And so like the whole game, that theme is just ripping through, and you're constantly doing things. Whereas at the very beginning,
I just went to click and add. That wasn't on my screen.
Nice.
So we hear the tempo's not very fast. Even though the scene is fairly intense, this person is getting chased by the scariest thing you could possibly imagine. And here's the home screen. Just very, very chill. Right? Just a total contrast with gameplay music. So it's really, and again, this is a piece when I was looking at building this workshop. I was trying to think like this piece immediately came to mind, or this not this piece, this a video game immediately came to mind because I remembered when I was playing it how different. As soon as the gameplay started, it was like, oh shoot, I gotta get going, and that music let me know. So tempo can have such a huge effect. What we were going to do is take those the rhythms that we created before, and do basically adjust the tempo to see what effect it has. So I'm going to stop presenting for a little bit. If you guys don't mind, actually, I do want to share the one that I came up with. Share this tab instead. This beat is the band teacher's worst nightmare, by the way. Here we go.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Funky drummer. What's wrong with this?
It's definitely not Funky Drummer. I wouldn't
Whatever
mind if it was Funky Drummer.
Maybe
It's a very simplified version of Funky Drummer. That beat, I call it the Forbidden Groove. But if we speed it up massively,
I don't get what's wrong with it though.
unfortunately, it's clipping a little bit, but that's a very common beat that you'll hear in electronic music. Even faster. Unfortunately, 180 is as fast as that'll go. Yeah. So, well, maybe this will help you kind of draw your attention to it as you're listening. That's good. And that's the whole point of these sessions, to help us see things that maybe we'd heard before, just hadn't noticed. We'll talk a lot about next week. We're looking at melody, and we're going to talk a lot about Nintendo because those composers were masters of melody. So anyway, as you can see, tempo, it's something a lot of people don't think about. Even band directors, when you get up there, you see the tempo on your page, and then you kind of... Yeah, I mean, some band teachers are very strict about sticking exactly to that tempo. Me, I like to experiment because I know a composer has maybe an idea, but sometimes when you take a piece and do something something that a composer didn't expect to happen, you can come up with something new. So sometimes a composer will look at it and say, "Ugh, yuck, gross," but beauty's in the ears of the listener, I suppose. So,
in a lot of arcade games, what's interesting is before the song, if you select the song before the song starts, a metronome will actually play the BPM for you before you start playing.
Yeah,
which is so that you can get all your timing right.
Exactly, and that's important. And when you're recording too, you'll notice. Did you try?
I got one. I got Cakewalk.
Cakewalk's great. And did you figure out how to turn the metronome on?
No.
Okay, so make sure you learn how to turn the metronome on, and then there's another setting you'll have to change so that it counts you in. So when you start recording, it actually counts you in, just like those games. So you can choose 1 bar, 2 bars, 4 bars, depending on the program you're using. Cakewalk's a PC one, so I'm not quite as familiar with that. But anyway. Okay. Yeah, it's something to play around with. So just some final thoughts, because we are at an hour here, so I want to get all the stuff that I had planned wrapped up. We can stick around for a little bit longer too, if we want. But I want to have a quick look at our rhythm and tempo worksheets. Did some of us get through those worksheets? It's just to help you get sort of in the mindset. And we actually ended up, now that I'm looking at this, we ended up talking about a lot of these things anyway. We talked about, how the music feels when you have more sounds. Did any of you, we had a chance to actually go through that live, which is great. The question that I really want to look at is the number 3. What kind of rhythms are you thinking of using in your clips? What do you think will be appropriate for those clips?
Maybe like mid tempo to relatively fast, because it's like a boss battle kind of.
Okay, so that's tempo. But what about your rhythms? Is it going to be, because you could have very simple rhythms at a fast tempo, or very complex rhythms at a slow tempo?
Yeah, I just have to experiment and figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the most important thing when you're doing music. It's an art, so experimenting is important. What kind of rhythm are you going to be using?
I don't know, I'm thinking of like a kind of like a synth wave kind of thing. So it's like a pretty simple rhythm, but
okay.
like
And
tempoed, but yeah, anyways.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's awesome. And then the next worksheet talking about tempo. Again, we kind of went over most of this during the presentation. It asks you to select a BPM. I don't know if I agree with committing to a BPM to your piece until things are just maybe a little bit more set. I think we found that experimenting with BPMs can really make a big difference. So my recommendation is have an idea of where your pulse is going to be, but then play around with it a little bit as you work through your experiment.
Like don't set a BPM and then commit to it the entire time if you feel like you should change it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's important. I think that goes without saying. Anything you do when you're writing music can always be changed and adjusted and adapted. And I think that's important. It's hard when you've written something down to change it because you've worked really hard at it. And then when you change it, you feel like that work goes to waste, but it really doesn't. You wouldn't have changed it if you hadn't put the work down in the first place. So that's why it's important that you kind of have an idea of BPM right now, pick it, set it, and then feel absolutely free to adjust. And then so I didn't think there was any. Did anybody have any questions in the worksheets? Like I said, we mostly covered that. There. Did anybody have any compositions they'd like to share so far? Or we still want to work things out a little bit more?
Just wanted to kind of jump in here about the worksheets. The worksheets are overall just guides. I mean, the nice thing is that, when you go to submit your piece, you don't need to submit the forms, those sheets as well.
Awesome.
These are just more so to kind of help guide you. So if you're not quite set on the tempo yet, that's completely fine.
Yeah. That's great. Good. Then let's, because it's still a little bit early on in this session, let's not worry about sharing our compositions. Maybe by Tuesday or at the very least Thursday, if we could have a couple compositions sort of ready. If you email it to me in advance, then I can kind of have a listen and help you out beforehand. But feel free to email me at any time. Keep composing. Any questions up to this point so far? No, it's all pretty straightforward. You guys are into this sort of stuff, so awesome. Cool. So I'm going to stop recording then. This was a great session. Thank you very much for being here.